Sports Betting Network.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday and welcome into the VSiN Morning Line. I'm Grace Remington with Michael Lombardi and Harrison Sanford recapping Monday Night Football and getting you ready for the week ahead. Thank you so much for starting your day right here with us. Let's give you a look ahead at who and what is coming up on the show at 7:30 Eastern. Our very own Matt Youmans joining us with his best bets for the week. At 8:45 Eastern, it's Matthew Friedman joining Harrison with a Fantasy Football Week 5 recap and a waiver wire update. And then at 9:30 Eastern, another Tuesday regular, Jonathan Von Tobel with an update on his VSiN NBA betting guide. That's right, it's getting to be that time. And, of course, his best bets for this football week. Coming up in this hour, we're getting into Monday Night Football, taking a look at the NFL Week 6 injury report, talking to Matt Youmans, and looking at fantasy studs and duds after 5 weeks in this season. So let's get into this Monday Night Football game where the Chiefs defeat the Saints 26-13, going into the bye an undefeated 5-0. Mahomes has his first game of the season where he goes over 300 passing yards. Michael, what was your biggest takeaway from this game?
Well, it's still the Chiefs' defense, right? It's still the Chiefs' defense, their ability to pressure. We saw Derek Carr return to the Derek Carr that we've all known and seen before. You know, pressure inside bothers him. He's, as I call him, Rory McIlroy I call him Ricky Fowler for a reason, because he kind of starts fast, like Ricky will do at the Masters, shoot 64, and then he's going to shoot a 79 on Friday. This is who Carr is. When there's no pressure, he can play well. When all of a sudden there's pressure on him, he doesn't play well. Now, in fairness to him, his offensive line has got a couple injuries which affect his ability to throw, but he doesn't stay in the pocket or hold it. The last 2 weeks he's been trying to throw checkdowns. So, look, this is a Kansas City defense that dominated the game. I don't think New Orleans was really ever in the game. They couldn't make a play. They couldn't come back in the fourth quarter to cover the 5.5-point spread that was at the end of the game. And the Chiefs are just methodical in what they're doing. They found a way to get Smith-Schuster the football wide open on the Saints defense. Another pass interference on a Saint defender. So it was just a kind of a very boring game, if you will, in the sense that the Chiefs did what they had to do to win the game. But I still didn't leave that game believing the Chiefs are unbeatable. I think the Chiefs can be beaten, but you're going to have to play well, and you're going to have to play really well in the fourth quarter.
As a man who likes parity in the NFL, Michael, I'm watching that game, and I'm saying to myself, how do the Chiefs just keep getting away with this? You look at the number of injuries that they have on the offensive side of the ball, and they just continue to find ways to win. Yesterday, obviously, using Juju Schuster in that wide receiver rotation to really open up that game. And, where they stand right now as they go into the bye, undefeated, I have to say to myself, and I have to ask you, realistically, who can beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs? Because as it stands right now, they're about to have home field advantage yet again.
Oh, I think Baltimore could go back there and win. They're a toe away from beating them. Baltimore's going to have to prove their pass defense tremendously to get there. I definitely think Buffalo could go in there and play them. Josh Allen knows how to play them. Buffalo can run the football. Buffalo ran the ball in a playoff game for 176 yards. If you know how to run the ball on a Steve Spagnuolo defense, you can. So I think there's opportunities for those two teams. But I agree with you, Harrison. It's few and far between. I mean, Miami's not going in there in January, even if Tua is healthy. We've seen that show before. It's freezing. And so he's not going to play well in that game. And I can't find another team, really. Houston, let's put Houston. Houston could go in there and play well because Houston's defense. See, I think the biggest thing is Houston's defense has got to, a defensive team has got to be able to go in there and play well. If you like the Jets' defense, which a lot of people do, you give them a chance, but their offense is not going to move the ball on a Steve Spagnuolo defense. It's just remarkable. I said yesterday on the show, you're going to have to get to 27 to win the game. The Saints are going to have to get into the 20s to win the game, and they scored 13. They just couldn't make any plays. And so for this offense that was on high octane for the first 2 weeks, it went on low octane here, and now the Chiefs have won 11 straight games with scoring under 27 points. And we have to shift our dynamic from thinking about them as an explosive offense. I know Mahomes threw for 300 yards, but there was blown coverages out there. He still threw another interception in the game. He's not the MVP of the league currently. He's the best player in the league, but he's not playing his best yet. But they're still 5-0.
Yeah, that is for sure. But I will ask you this. I want to go back to what you said about the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens, two teams that could run the ball. But so could the New Orleans Saints. I mean, going into last night's game, the New Orleans Saints led the NFL in rushing attempts per game. What exactly did Steve Spagnuolo do to make sure that rushing game from Alvin Kamara and company was null and void?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with the depth of the offensive line for the Saints, right? I think the Saints, when they go into that game and they don't have Ruiz in the starting lineup, they don't have McCoy, two of their better players in their offensive line. And so now they have to start, now they're basically starting guys that are backups. Really, the inside positions were backups for them, and that's not what they want to do. And I think that affected their run game. I think they ran the football earlier in the year when they had those two players, Ruiz and McCoy, in there. They're high draft picks that they count on to be good. So I think that losing that, and then, it's hard. You've got to really understand how to run the ball. When you play a team infrequently, like the Saints never really play the Chiefs, you really don't understand how to attack them. Now, here's the difference. I mean, Clint Kubiak was on that staff last year for the 49ers. He coached in the Super Bowl game for the 49ers. You would have thought he would have been able to come up with a better run game in this game, but they just couldn't get it going. And partly the problem, too, is you're playing in Kansas City with that crowd noise. Man, it's hard to run the ball when you can't hear.
Michael, you brought it up, all the different offensive line combinations Derek Carr has played with. And the exact thing we talked about yesterday, how Derek Carr plays under pressure. We saw that happen on the first drive when he was pressured by Karlaftis before he finishes his drop back. He panics, throws the interception. That leads to a touchdown for the Chiefs. I think Derek Carr has played with at least two, maybe three different men at center right now, and that affects your cadence. So how do you see this impacting Derek Carr and the Saints as the season progresses?
Well, I think anytime he gets inside pressure, he's going to get rid of the football. I mean, it goes back to when he played at Fresno State. That's the reason he's a second-round draft pick. I mean, you go work out Derek Carr. He's got great arm. He's got rhythm. His arm and his feet are tied together. He's got all those things, but what he doesn't really have is that ability to stand in there. He's a little bit like Jared Goff. This isn't a criticism. This is just what it is. He needs to be able to have a protected pocket. And if he doesn't, he's going to throw the ball carelessly away. That's an unforced error interception. He's throwing the ball out of bounds. Like, what are we doing here? What are we trying to do here? So for me, I just think it's really bad that he does that and he hurts his team. And I think that's what really affects him. I think not having Taysom Hill to take some of the pressure off him, especially when they get in the red zone, I think that's a problem too. But you're right, the offensive line, if he's not fully protected, and that was the Saints' main objective this offseason, was to get better offensive linemen to protect him. That's why they drafted the first-round pick at left tackle. But when they break down, Carr reverts back to being the Carr we've seen before.
I imagine today we're going to get some news about Derek Carr's injury. It wouldn't also surprise me today, Michael, that we potentially get some news about Davante Adams. But if I am Davante Adams and it's been reported that I wanted to go to the Saints or the New York Jets, after last night's game, looking at their record and a potential absence for Derek Carr, maybe 1 to 2 games, if I'm Davante Adams, I can't go to New Orleans, can I?
No, I mean, I wouldn't want to go there. I mean, I wouldn't want to go there. They have a good team, but I think Adams knows Carr really well. They played together at Fresno State. They know him. He knows him really well. He knows his strengths and he knows his weaknesses. And so that would be I think Adams wants to go to the Jets. But look, this is a hard trade to make. This is a really hard trade to make because the Raiders are asking for a second-round pick for a guy who's going to make $13 million. I mean, nobody's giving that up. This is going to be a hard trade to make. They want to get it done this week. Good luck.
All right, we'll get into that Monday Night Football game as the show progresses. Kansas City covers as a 5.5-point favorite. The under 43.5 hits. But let's do a little baseball recap here because we had some exciting MLB playoff action last night. The Tigers Guardians came down to 2 outs in the top of the ninth. Clase throws 3 sliders in the row. The final one hangs in the sweet spot, and Kerry Carpenter takes advantage with a no-doubter to right center. That 3-run shot gives the first runs of the games to the Tigers and the lead. That's a lead they would keep. They go on to win it by that score. They actually chased Clase out of that final inning. So Detroit cashes as a 130 money line favorite. That goes under the total of 6. Now the series goes back to Motor City, tied at 1-1 apiece. The projected starters in that game, Ben Lively for the Guardians and Reese Olson for the Tigers. It opens with the Guardians a slight favorite at -112, the Tigers at -104 with a total of 7. Royals and Yankees also played a game 2 last night. Cole Ragans and Carlos Rodon did not go as deep as expected. Ragans made it 4 innings, Rodon 3.2. Giancarlo Stanton gets the first run on the board in the bottom of the 3rd with an RBI single. The Royals followed it up with a huge 4-run 4th inning with a leadoff 402-foot homer from Salvi Perez. Veteran presence from that 2015 World Series team. Royals go on to win 4-2. So this thing goes back to Kansas City, all tied up at 1-1 apiece. The projected starters in Game 3, Clark Schmidt and Seth Lugo. The Yankees open as a slight -115 favorite on the money line. The Royals -105 with a total of 8. Harrison, sorry about your Yankees.
We'll talk about it later, Grace. I got some thoughts.
All right, good. Can't wait to hear it. Coming up next, we're looking ahead at the Week 6 NFL lines before they start moving and giving you an update to the NFL injury report. This is the VSiN Morning Line.
Time. There's nothing more valuable. It's what drives everyone to make the most of every moment. We celebrate living large in the now. In a city where time disappears, we create experiences that electrify the soul and memories that will last forever. We go big, we go all night, and here, everyone is invited. So get loose and get loud.
This is Circa. You'll have the time of your life.
Coming up Tuesday on Follow the Money, playoff baseball. The NHL season starts. We talk to Jonathan Davis. Also, Paul Stone on the biggest week of college football with picks. Follow the Money weekdays, 4 to 7 Eastern on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Want to see who at VSiN is on a hot streak? Go to VSiN.com/picks to see all the selections and weekly leaderboard of VSiN hosts, writers, and guests. Become a VSiN Pro subscriber and get every pick sent to your inbox daily. Just head to VSiN.com/pro.
So, Paulie, have you had a chance to read the VSiN Daily yet?
Yeah, came in at 3 a.m. What's Bill doing up that late?
Well, rumor has it, it starts off with a 12-hour meditation session.
Then he just pours himself over film and live TV, really focusing and taking it all in. Bill's in with the biggest insiders, talking trade secrets, strategies, the whole nine, absorbing the info.
And then and only then can the writing process begin.
In Las Vegas, Bill's late night becomes your early morning. Wake up to the very latest betting insights in your inbox with the VSiN Daily. Sign up for free at vsin.com/newsletter. You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back into the VSiN Morning Line. Thanks for getting your workday started with us as we get you ready for week 6 of the NFL season. We're taking a look at some of the notable injuries around the league, and I'll start with the quarterbacks and skill players here, Michael. Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice, we finally got an update to him, unlikely to play this season as he's dealing with an LCL injury. Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers with a low ankle sprain. He is probable against the Bills. Texans wide receiver Nico Collins dealing with a hamstring. He is week to week. Vikings running back Aaron Jones dealing with a hip injury. He is probable week 7 against the Lions. And then Titans quarterback Will Levis dealing with that shoulder injury is expected to practice this week. Which one do you think is the most important of these injuries?
Well, I think it's clearly Nico Collins, because when Nico Collins left the game on Sunday early, after his touchdown pass reception, the Texans offense kind of just went completely stagnant. There was no explosiveness. They tried to get the ball to Tank Dell. Diggs really didn't make a play down the field. And you could see C.J. Stroud struggled because his security blanket, his big play guy, was gone. So, that's going to affect Houston. But the good news is Houston goes to New England this week. And if they can't beat New England minus Nico Collins, then they can't beat Kansas City in Kansas City with them. So they're going to have to go up there and play well, but they can do that against a New England team that's really rocking. Now, I fully expect New England, not that this is on the injury front, I think New England's probably due for a quarterback change. There's so much movement up there to change quarterbacks. What are we doing playing Brissett? We can't do anything. We might as well get the young kids some reps. I can hear it in Mayo's voice that he could be bucket on that. So, but if they play the rookie in New England, and with Houston's defensive front, with their ability to pass rush, that would be a mistake. But I think not having Nico Collins this week, Houston can skirt by. The other one, to me, is Will Levis. I mean, Will Levis is, he has been anointed the starter here, and I'm not sure why, because the Colts come to town, and I think, to me, they've got a better chance with Will Levis. You're playing against Will Levis than if you were playing against Mason Rudolph. I know Gus Bradley's got to be happy about that.
Mike, I want to go back to the point that you made as it pertains to Drake May potentially getting the start. And there was definitely some rumors yesterday of that actually happening. I agree with you, with guys like Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter might not be ideal to start a rookie quarterback. When do you think, though, if you're looking at their schedule, when do you think it is a good time to actually put Drake May out there?
Well, I don't think there's a good time for that team because their offensive line is so bad. But that being said, that's not practical, right? I mean, you just can't keep the guy on the shelf all year because you're scared to play him. At some point, you got to put him into the fire. Next week they go down to Jacksonville, probably not a good place to play. They get the Jets again at home. Maybe that's the right time. And then they're on the road for 2 games with Tennessee and Chicago. So to me, you want to start them on a home game where you have crowd noise in your favor, where you might have some energy. You try to start them on the road. I think that's a little bit of a hard place. Now, look, Jacksonville's not a hard place to play. They don't show up there. I mean, you look at their upper deck. I mean, I know they're remodeling that stadium in Jacksonville, but they can't fill up the stadium they have. So I think, to me, this is the perfect week. If you're going to do it, you might as well do it this week.
All right, I want to keep it to another injury here too, Michael. And this one, obviously, Nico Collins, one of the more talented players on that injury list that we looked at. But also, I want to talk about Dax Hill, even though he's not as good as Nico Collins. I do think, Michael, that this maybe could be symbolic of where the Bengals season is going. Obviously, they still have Cam Taylor-Britt on the other side, but it does feel like with their record, and as the season goes on, Lord knows we're going to continue to see injuries for every team. And I know you pointed out yesterday that T. Higgins could eventually be moved. Could this be something that's symbolic of the soon coming end of this regime of the Cincinnati Bengals, or the Bengals as we know them?
Well, they've got 3 critical injuries, right? Sheldon Rankins, who they signed from Houston, they're counting on him to be a defensive tackle. He's not played. Dak Hill, as you mentioned, with his ACL. And then Mike Hilton, their nickel player, he's been out too. So they're down 2 corners. And they drafted DJ Turner last year, who played a lot of football for them. And this year they drafted Josh Newton in the 5th round, so they're going to have to play some young guys. I think the biggest issue with Cincinnati has been their front. Besides Hendrickson, we haven't heard much from Hubbard this year. They drafted Miles Murphy in the 1st round. They just signed Lawrence Guy to help them inside. I think this is a team that needs more defensive players up front to help them. I agree, losing Dak Hill is a concern, but Dak Hill was a safety last year that they moved to corner. They're hoping he could be the guy. And now there's a huge void there. There's a huge void there, and they're going to play the Giants. And look, you think they're only a 3.5-point favorite against the Giants on the road, and how do the Giants stop them? Good question. But how do the Bengals stop the Giants? I mean, the Giants moved the ball on Seattle, and Seattle's a better defense right now than what we've seen out of Cincinnati so far this season. And if you can run the ball, which the Giants can do, Tracy was a good back for them last week. So I think, to me, this Bengal defense has got to be carried by their offense.
Let's get into some of these Week 6 lines and do kind of an early look ahead here. 49ers and Seahawks coming off the 2 biggest upsets of Week 5. Now they play each other on a short week and Thursday night football. The number moved a little bit bigger yesterday from 3 to 3.5 as the Niners are taking in a little bit more money here, 55% of the tickets, but 64% of the handle. So the Niners a road favorite in this one. Michael, how do you see this game going?
Well, I mean, this is a short week. The Niners got to be furious with themselves, and it was an exhausting week for the Niners. It was 100 degrees out at San Francisco last week, unheard of. The record temperatures that are on the West Coast, and I think on a short week that could affect them, plus with travel. That concerns you as you go up there, plus their injury report. Their defense just isn't anywhere near it once was. And to beat Seattle, you've got to dominate the defensive front. Nick Bosa's got to play really well. Seattle's offensive line is a mess. It's one of the reasons why they struggle offensively. They've just not been able. That's why they had to sign Jason Peter back, because their tackle situation isn't very good. I think this could be a shootout. I really do. I think both teams can move the football on one another. I don't think the Niners are nearly as good as people think they are defensively. I think that's a concern. Arizona moved the ball when they needed to, and San Francisco couldn't stop them. But I think the Niners have to be able to control the football, and you can run the ball on Seattle. So this is a game where if you're Kyle Shanahan, you've got to control the ball 34, 35 minutes. Give your defense some rest, because in the 4th quarter of that Arizona game, they were exhausted.
Moving on to another divisional matchup, going to the NFC South. You have the Buccaneers taking on the Saints, and I find this one a bit curious, Michael, because as of right now, I believe the Saints are laying 2. Yes, it is a divisional matchup, but there has to be a major concern with Derek Carr, considering how he left last night's Monday Night Football game.
Yeah, I mean, that is really the concern. And I'm surprised they didn't take this number off the board, because he's got an oblique, right? And they're not going to put Jake Horner in this game and think they're going to be very good against a Todd Bowles defense, which is going to come after them from every single angle as soon as they get off the bus. Yes, I know they're playing home, but that doesn't really make it any easier for the quarterback against a defense that wants to attack and blitz. So, they love Spencer Rattler all summer. They loved him, but I don't know if they're going to play him. I think he's hurt. He's listed as an injury player too. So this is a real issue for their team. I mean, they don't have a lot of players healthy. And if they have to play, a game without Carr it's going to be a problematic, especially in a divisional game that they need to win. I mean, they've already given one away to Atlanta. Atlanta snuck by with 2 of these games. They kind of should have lost 2 of them, but they won both of them, which gives them the upper hand.
Yeah, that's a line we saw flip overnight. Last night as we went to bed, the Bucs were a 2-point dog. Then as we wake up this morning, they are a 1.5-point favorite. Another divisional matchup on Monday Night Football between the Bills and Jets. Last week's look ahead had this line at 1.5. It reopened at 2.5, and it's kind of toggled between that and the key number of 3 for the last a day and a half, as a little bit more money is coming in on the Jets here. They're holding 16% of the tickets, but 38% of the handle. How do you see this AFC East divisional matchup going?
Well, I mean, we know that Rodgers has beat up. I mean, he's taken some really severe hits over the last 3 weeks. And this is really going to come down to their ability to protect Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they can't protect him. Now, everybody has been able to run the football on the Bills all year, and I think that's going to be the key for the Jets. The Jets can't go into Buffalo and think they're going to throw it 50 times and win the game. They're going to have an offense where they can run the football, control the clock, because we know that Buffalo will struggle. I mean, look, if they're going to play man-to-man against Buffalo, who's getting open against Sauce? Who's getting open against DJ Reed? It's going to be a hard game. They're going to have to find a way to run the football. I think this line, if it gets to 3, I could see why people would take the Jets. I think these are back-and-forth games. You know, the Jets won last year when Rodgers got hurt on opening day. So, you know, they understand how to run the football on them. I think that's going to be the key.
All right, getting into more NFL previews and hitting the college football ranks next. It is time to lock in some best bets with Matt Youmans. He joins the show with his favorite plays for the week. This is the VSiN Morning Line.
VSiN's got you covered for the start of the season with our football special. For $175, you'll get access to everything VSiN has to offer. With VSiN Pro, you'll receive daily picks straight to your inbox, detailed analysis on every game, and exclusive data like our betting splits to help you become a sharper bettor. Get all of this for just $175 through the Super Bowl. Or try a monthly subscription and get your first 30 days for only $9.99. Don't miss out on this offer. Sign up now at VSiN.com/subscribe.
This is VSiN, the sports betting network.
You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Happy Tuesday, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the VSiN Morning Line. Harrison Sanford, Michael Lombardi, and Grace Remington. And just when we thought we had this whole NFL football thing solved as it pertains to underdogs of 5.5 points or more, we didn't have it solved. If you look at last night, the Saints, who were getting 5.5 points, were not able to come out with the victory over the Kansas City Chiefs. We're about to break that down and so much more with our next guest. Joining us on the Progressive Guest Line is VSiN host Matt Youmans. Matt, where were you going into last night's game, considering the fact that underdogs had been so successful this year, particularly in tight matchups with low totals?
Yeah, exactly. And that trend did not hold last night. You can't just blindly bet trends, but if you look at the Chiefs, they played all one-score games up to this point. It looks like there was going to be another one-score game last night, but I got to tell you, and I know Michael's probably breaking down the tape of this game, I thought the Saints had a terrible defensive game plan last night. They were leaving tight ends, and including Travis Kelce, wide open in the middle of the field. And you can't do that. And it was way too easy for the Kansas City offense to move up and down the field last night. Chiefs had a couple of critical turnovers that kept the Saints in the game. But if you look at the box score, Harrison, it was completely lopsided. 460 to 220 in total yards, 28 to 14 in first downs. The Saints were lucky to even be in the game last night. And it was a very disappointing performance for anyone who bet the underdog last night, because that looked on paper like it should have been a one-score game. And actually, if you look at the box score, it probably should have been a blowout in favor of the Chiefs. And the Chiefs had not played that well. They were 4-0 going into last night, but 3 plays away from being 1-3.
And New Orleans is 2 plays away from being undefeated. I mean, they blow
Right.
2 coverages on their defense, and you know they easily could have beaten Philly, and they easily could have beaten Atlanta. So to me, it was a bad one. I was on New Orleans last night. I recommended that, gave that out. I took it in Russo, and I really thought there was going to be a backdoor cover. Of course, when you miss an extra point, that doesn't help you on a backdoor cover. We probably would have lost anyway, 26-20, even if they scored. But I agree with you. I thought their offensive game plan was horrible. I thought defensively, you know, letting Smith-Schuster run wild. I mean, they ran him out of New England. Imagine getting a receiver who can't play for the Patriots and he gains over 100 yards for you. Think about that, Matt. I mean, how about that? Is that unbelievable?
It is. Smith-Schuster last night looked like Tyreek Hill. He was tearing up the Saints defense. And Smith-Schuster and Travis Kelce were wide open all over the field. There was one play in the fourth quarter where Smith-Schuster caught the ball, and there wasn't a defender within 20 yards of him. Like you said, I thought the Saints were going to be much more competitive. Their previous 2 games, they blew late leads and losses to the Eagles and the Falcons. Not too far away from being 4-0, but that was a pretty disappointing performance.
Yeah. All right. So let's spin it this week. Let's go ahead to this week. And you talking about the Jets and the Bills, and that line is slightly moving. It's 2.5. It may get to 3, but I'm sure it'll bounce back down to the Jets. The Jets, another disappointing team. They should have covered in that game, except Rodgers. They couldn't make plays. He's got Garrett Wilson wide open for a touchdown, doesn't throw it to him. What's your handicap on this game?
Well, I'm not sure how I'm going to play this yet. If the number goes to 3, or I can get a 3, I might play the Jets as home dogs. I do think Josh Allen was banged up in that game at Houston. He was 9 for 30. He wasn't right, obviously. I was surprised he was allowed to return to the field after hitting his head so hard on the turf. But I'm very disappointed in the Jets, too, especially Aaron Rodgers. His lack of mobility in the pocket, and it's not just the mobility. Michael, he's made bad decisions and bad throws. He looked more like a rookie quarterback in that game. And actually, in a couple of games recently, he just has not looked like Aaron Rodgers of from what we remember from 4 or 5 years ago. He wasn't even that good in his last season with the Packers. But this is a spot where you got to think the Jets as home dogs are going to be dangerous. I don't know about Rodgers' health. He looked pretty banged up at the end of the game. Tyrod Taylor is actually a decent backup if they got to use him. But the Bills, really struggling right now. They got exposed in their last two games on the road, and I think this might be a decent spot to play the Jets as home dogs, but I'll wait and see if I can get 3 with that one. Not going to play it yet. We'll have to kind of watch that situation a little bit this week. I don't like that Jets coaching staff either. There's a lot of things wrong with that team, but there's some things wrong with the Bills right now too. I did want to ask you about the Raiders here. I'm thinking about playing the Steelers, and it's 3 across the board, but it looks like a couple spots might be close to 2.5. Or do you just bet the Steelers on the money line because they're scoring about 17 points a game? Feels like that's what they're going to score about every game. How did the Steelers lose Sunday night to the Cowboys when Dallas turned it over 3 times and had a field goal blocked? And Dak had 2 turnovers in the red zone. You don't lose games where you're typically 4+4 in turnover margin, which was what I'll call it with the blocked field goal as well. And they lose on the last play of the game. Well, the Steelers have lost the last 2 by exactly 3 points. I think that puts them in a good situation to bounce back on the road here. And let's face it, the Raiders are in complete disarray. They were in position to go up 17-3 on the Broncos, and Gardner Minshew throws a 100-yard pick 6. And Antonio Pierce is talking about changing quarterbacks again. It just seems like it's a mess. Like you said, the Raiders in disarray. I probably want to play the Steelers in that game.
I think that's the right play. I think, to me, especially if knowing that, Pierce is wobbling on the quarterback, and he could go back to Aiden O'Connell, who threw a pick in that game. Aiden O'Connell isn't. The concern I have for the Steelers is really, I think the Steelers win that game last week, except Nate Herbig, their defensive end, number 51. He gets hurt. He pulls a hamstring, and he's got to come out of the game. And so then T.J. Watt was rushing by himself. I think if he were healthy in that game, I think they would have gotten a sack. They would have done something, the 2 of them. That, to me, is a really good combination. I know Highsmith is the noted player in Pittsburgh, but Herbig is incredibly talented. He plays hard. He's been a force on the outside for them. And when they lost him, Matt, in that game, I think that affected him. I don't know if he'll play this week. Highsmith's on IR, so he's definitely not going to play. And so, but look, they won't block T.J. Watt. They probably won't game plan to block T.J. Watt. So I like that play on your part. The other one I wanted to ask you about is, what about the Bengals-Giants game? Like, I want to take the Bengals here, but the Giants are going to move the ball on that bad Bengal defense.
How about the Giants winning in Seattle with no Malik Neighbors, no Singletary? I've always said I feel like the Giants are better on the road in the underdog role, and a lot of times they're flat at home. It's just it's kind of a difficult team to figure. You don't see that too often, but the Giants, obviously, they played their best game so far on the road when they were dogs. Daniel Jones is cutting out that Seattle defense with no Malik Neighbors. I think the Bengals got to be really frustrated here at 1-4. They blew the game against Baltimore. Anybody who had the Bengals plus 2.5's got to be sick about the way that game turned out. Zach Taylor, way too conservative with the play calling, settling for a 53-yard field goal attempt in overtime. This is a game where I think the Bengals are going to go up and down the field. There's nothing wrong with their offense really right now, aside from the conservative play calls by Taylor. But it's probably going to be Bengals or pass. It's probably going to be Bengals or pass for me here. And I don't want to play the Giants off the big win in Seattle. I think this is a game Cincinnati's going to win.
Matt, I was told reliably yesterday that you and I and other people that had the Bengals in that game betting weren't the only people unhappy with Zach Taylor's play calling. His locker room was really upset about it too. And so I don't think Zach's got many people in that locker room supporting him in terms of that decision on to cut the kick from a 54-yarder down to a 52-yarder. I'm sorry, Grace. Go ahead.
Yeah, Matt, I would love to get some college football official plays in here from you. The game that we've all been waiting for all season long is finally here. Ohio State, Oregon. Ducks a rare home dog. Which way you taking this?
Grace, we got a lot we're not going to get through. I like the Padres tonight, too, but we'll talk college football. Keep up your hot handicapping, by the way. I know you've been on a hot streak here lately. I am going to play Oregon. The look headline was Ohio State 1.5. I'm not sure what the Buckeyes have done here recently for this number to be pumped up to 3.5. It even opened at 4. Ohio State's beat Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall and Iowa at home. 4 bad offensive teams. and Michigan State on the road. And the Spartans aren't anything special offensively either. Last week, the Buckeyes led Iowa 7-0 at half. Hawkeyes had 4 punts and a missed field goal. You're going to go on the road here and face an Oregon team that's much more efficient offensively. I know that Dylan Gabriel's made a few big mistakes here early in the season. He's still completing 78% of his passes with 11 touchdowns, 3 picks. I like the Ducks as home dogs. I think the Buckeyes going on the road to the West Coast going to be a tough one for them. And I'm surprised this number has crossed over 3. I'll take the 3.5 gladly with Oregon here. I think the Ducks got a great shot to win this game.
Matt, as always, we appreciate your insight and enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, you too. You bet. Thanks.
All right. Matt also likes USC plus 5.5 taking on Penn State this weekend, and also looking at that Padres minus 145 taking on the Dodgers. Coming up after the break, we turn to the fantasy football side of things on the NFL slate. Fantasy studs and duds coming up next. This is the VSiN Morning Line.
In the heart of downtown Las Vegas, a sports oasis awaits. Stadium Swim, the ultimate outdoor amphitheater, built for the ultimate sports fan, with a colossal screen that brings the game closer than ever. Reserve a daybed, private cabana, or lounge in the center of it all. 6 pools to dive into as the game heats up. And the best part, there's never an off-season. Open 365 days a year. Stadium Swim, it's always spectator season.
Looking for the ultimate sports betting podcasts? VSiN has got you covered. With a wide range of podcasts covering every major sport, we're here to help you make smarter bets every season. The Baseball Betting Show with Greg Peterson gives you daily insights into finding value on each day's MLB card. And check out Long Shots, where we deep dive into the world of golf betting, providing you with expert insights to help you bet every tournament. Find all of these podcasts and more at VSiN.com/podcasts or your favorite podcast platform.
You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
It is Tuesday. Time to lick our fantasy football wounds or celebrate our victories and hopefully get another one this upcoming weekend as we head to week 6 of NFL action. Thank you for tuning in to the VSiN Morning Line. Harrison Sanford and Michael Lombardi joining you to talk about fantasy football, particularly fantasy studs and duds. But we know it is Tuesday, so before we do that, have to look at the waiver wire and how some of you guys can improve your team, whether it be at the running back, quarterback, or wide receiver position. So, Michael, I got some wide receivers I want to discuss with you. And first, I'll just isolate it to the Indianapolis Colts. We've seen standout performances now, back-to-back weeks from Josh Downs and Alec Pierce. Now, obviously, that's because Joe Flacco is in at quarterback. If you had to pick between those two, who can be the greater fantasy asset as long as Joe Flacco is quarterback there?
Well, Flacco, throws the ball in the third level really well. I mean, the throws he made to Pierce, the 2 touchdowns, were sensational. And Pierce made great catches. I think, to me, you got to go Pierce here because of his big strike ability. I think Downs is really good, too. I think they kind of have some juice to them, but they only have juice when Flacco's playing. It's the same thing that happened. I mean, if you put Flacco back on Cleveland's team, those receivers would start to have some juice, too. So I think I lean towards Pierce here, Harrison.
Yep, I could definitely understand that. But even if you are a fantasy football manager, definitely important to pay attention to what Shane Steichen says at his press conference tomorrow as it pertains to Anthony Richardson coming back into the lineup, because that will definitely change their production, one would assume. All right, let's go to some other wide receivers. Michael, just tell me the best one out of the group. You got Keon Coleman, who had that standout play against the Houston Texans this past weekend, even though he didn't have a lot of production outside of that. Juju Smith-Schuster, who absolutely went off against the New Orleans Saints last night. And Tutu Atwell, who has been playing at a serviceable, if not really good level for the LA Rams, particularly with their injuries to Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Which one of those three would you value the most on your roster?
Well, I think with Kupp coming back, Atwell kind of will take a little bit of a back seat. He's been a big strike playability. I don't think you could count on Smith-Schuster. I think somebody's going to cover him. I mean, if you look at his plays, nobody was covering him. He didn't really have to separate from anybody. So I think, to me, that would be the hard one there. Who was the first one again? I'm sorry, the first one.
Oh, for Keon Coleman.
Keon Coleman. I think I lean to Coleman because he's got to have to get better. I think I would definitely lean towards Coleman there because I think he'll get better, he'll improve, and they got to get him incorporated in the offense. I mean, it's either get him going or they're not going to have a passing game.
Yeah, or just trade for Devontae Adams. We'll see how that one continues to develop. All right, let's go to the running back position. 4 guys I'm going to point out to you, and just let me know which one's the best one on a fantasy football roster. Antonio Gibson, who was a threat to take the starting job in New England after Ramondre Stevenson had his fumbling problems, but looks like Stevenson kind of solved that this past weekend. Alexander Madison, Ty Chandler, especially with that Aaron Jones injury, could be somewhat valuable. And Roschon Johnson, who I now believe has back-to-back weeks with the rushing touchdown for the Chicago Bears.
I think I'm going to go. I think I would go with Johnson. I think he didn't average. He averaged he had like 25 yards on a carry. Gibson really isn't going to be a prospect in that area. I can't see that he's going to do that. So I mean that's a hard one. I think these guys that come up and come back down. Actually, I think Kareem Hunt's better than any of the names you gave me there.
Yep, no, that is for sure, unfortunately, for most people, or at least mostly Kareem Hunt, no longer available. And if he is available, seems like you should definitely be trying your best to get him on your roster.
Yeah, because I think some of these guys, like Gibson, you take him, they're not going to be able to run the football against them. It's hard.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. It feels like he could somewhat...
Well, they can't run block. I mean, it's hard to take a guy, especially if they get behind. Like if they get behind against Houston, he's not running the ball.
Yeah, that's for sure. It does feel like he could potentially add some PPR value, maybe a lot of checkdowns. But again, it's that New England Patriots offense, and so that's not necessarily the most desirable unit to have on your roster. All right, I want to get to...
But one more, though, Harrison. Chandler, to me, is the one that looks the most alluring, but we don't know about Aaron Jones' injury, how long that's going to be, because Aaron Jones is the best player. If you take Chandler, and Jones comes back, they're going to play Jones.
Yep, I could definitely understand that. That is why I'm monitoring that waiver wire and that injury report is so important. At least in my league, we actually don't do waivers until Wednesday, because at least on Wednesday, you do get that initial injury report. All right, some quarterbacks to monitor: Caleb Williams, Kirk Cousins, Trevor Lawrence, and Daniel Jones. We'll talk about those guys later on in the show, but want to get to the fantasy studs and duds. And I know this guy, you're going to highlight him later, but let's give him his shine now, because Brian Thomas Jr., Michael, has absolutely been doing his thing this whole season, and particularly this past weekend. 5 receptions, 122 yards, and a touchdown versus the Colts. Now it is Gus Bradley and the Colts, so that obviously is a favorable matchup, but I think you believe that he's going to be trending up regardless of the opponent.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he seems to have an ability to get down the field, and he is the number one receiver on their team. I think there's no question that Trevor Lawrence has kind of gotten very comfortable with him, and I think he certainly would be a good play. I think, to me, one thing about the Jags offense, they're going to throw the ball because that's what they want to do.
All right, let's get to another wide receiver. And if you drafted DJ Moore this year, you definitely were disappointed through the first 3 games of the season. Last 2 weeks, a lot better. He had 5 receptions this past weekend on 8 targets for 105 yards, 2 touchdowns, but it was against the Carolina Panthers. Again, when it comes to fantasy football, you also have to consider the quality of opponent. So was this more about the Panthers, or was this more about Caleb Williams and DJ Moore really getting chemistry?
I think it's about the Panthers. I mean, that was just this horrible performance by the Panthers. Look, I think DJ Moore's a good player. I'm not disputing anything. But, when you're running wide open and no one's covering you on an over route, I mean, is that on you? I mean, anybody can make that play, and so it's the ones that you have to separate on man-to-man. It's like Smith-Schuster last night. I mean, he's wide open. Nobody's covering him. Hell, anybody can make that play. So that Panther defense was about as bad as I've seen on tape in a long time. I mean, they didn't look like they wanted to be in Chicago. They didn't care about Chicago, and they sure as hell didn't look like they wanted to play. It looked like they all got their money and they ran home.
Yeah, so that is definitely something to consider if you are a fantasy football manager. If Michael believes that it was more about the opponent, might be time to sell high on DJ Moore. Let's move over to some dud performances. And first and foremost, let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. George Pickens has been a source of wide receiver relief for a lot of rosters, just not this past Sunday. 3 receptions, 26 yards against the Dallas Cowboys. And with concerns about Justin Fields and his long-term viability at quarterback, could this be a trend that continues, or was this just a blip on the radar for Pickens?
Well, no, Pickens has got really good talent. I know Mike Tomlin talked about needing to manage his reps, which it tells you that he makes a lot of mistakes. I mean, the fans are all, well, don't have an offense if he's not on the field. Well, maybe sometimes he's not doing what he needs to do. They're trying to contain his mistakes. And I think, to me, his lack of effort sometimes shows up, and especially in the run blocking game. So, look, he's a very talented guy. I think they'll make a quarterback shift. We'll find out more tomorrow. But if they do, will it help George Pickens? I don't know. This offensive line struggles to pass protect. He's got to make explosive plays down the field. That's his game. And if he doesn't, then you're going to be it's hit or miss with him. It really is. I think it's more miss than hit sometimes.
Yeah, definitely somebody you need to consider maybe flexing more than relying on in your wide receiver 2 spot. Let's move on to one more dud performance. Chris Olave did have 2 receptions for 10 receiving yards last night versus Kansas City. Maybe that was more Trent McDuffie than anything, and obviously the pressure that Kansas City can put on teams. Let's focus in on San Francisco. Deebo Samuel, 1 reception, 11 yards against the Arizona Cardinals, of all teams. Cause for concern if you're a fantasy football owner of Deebo Samuel.
Well, Debo's a jack of all trades. He's really, nobody wants to hear this, but I've been saying it for 4 years. He's not really a true outside receiver. That's why they had to sign Ayuk. I mean, it would have been easy to let Ayuk go, but they couldn't because they need an outside receiver to win one-on-one routes. Debo's a running back, plays receiver. He's a jack of all trades. You got to hand him the ball off. You want the ball in his hands. You want to be able to get him the football on the move and let him use his size, his power, his toughness to go. That's when he's at his absolute strength. So to me, and as more players come back for the Niners, I mean, Debo's still going to have a role, but it's not going to be as an outside receiver. I think that's when he'll improve his numbers because the outside he won't have to play on the outside.
Definitely something to note. We'll get into more fantasy football in the next hour with Matthew Friedman. And when we come back from break, we're going to get into news or noise around the end.
A new football season means a new lineup on VSiN. Start your day with sharp betting analysis